Hello all, and welcome to the Clubhouse. I'm your host, Craig. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I want to chat about one of my favorite movies, Superman the movie from 1978. Now this movie is a cultural touchstone for many people's Superman fandom and, quite frankly, superhero fandom at large. Kevin Feige has stated the film's dick, meaning Richard Donner, the director, the film's dick made inspired me to even want to go down that track. Feige continues, and of course, in particular, Superman the movie is still to this day the archetype of the perfect superhero film origin story. The archetype of the perfect superhero film story. Let's let that idea breathe a little bit. The perfect superhero film origin story. This Superman the movie, that is the blueprint for creating resonant superhero film origin stories. Feige continues, and we watch it before we make almost any one of our films. And that's been the case for the past 17 years since I left the fold to go work for Marvel. End quote. Feige said that this just after the passing of Superman's director Richard Donner was made public. This quote is why I wanted to talk about Superman the movie. I wanted to see if we could actually identify the fingerprints of Donner's Superman on Feige's work in the MCU. This first episode will be just about Superman the movie. I really hope you enjoyed. I've had a blast researching it and watching the movie. Subsequent episodes will focus on various MCU films and whether or not Superman can be seen in them. What makes Superman the movie so poignant? Why did it have such a strong cultural impact at its time? I did a little research into some numbers, and if we adjust Superman the movie's box office for inflation, it grossed $1.09 billion. That would put it 11th out of the 33 released MCU movies. The only Phase 1 movie that outgrossed it was The Avengers, the 6th movie in the MCU franchise. According to an episode on NPR, All Things Considered, more than 100 million people went to see Avengers Endgame, the MCU's crown jewel and most successful film to date. In 2023, Life published an 85th anniversary magazine celebrating Superman, titled Life, Superman, the Comics, the Films, the Cape. In the magazine's second chapter, they posit that approximately 120 million people saw Superman in its original theatrical run in 1978. Let that massive number sink in. More people saw Superman the movie in its theatrical run than saw the massive juggernaut Avengers Endgame. More people at fewer screens from a smaller population base. That means approximately 2.7 of the world's population plopped down money in a theater to watch Superman. For comparison, approximately 1.4% of the world's population went to see Avengers Endgame. That's not to degrade it. I loved Avengers Endgame. I went to it at least twice. I was so excited to see what would happen. It's a culmination of an incredible story that I was lucky enough to experience from beginning to end, from 2008's Iron Man right down to 2019's Endgame. But this puts into context the incredible success of Superman the movie at its time. It's a serious blockbuster. A lot of people saw the movie. It made a lot of money. But why would Feige look at it as the blueprint for most of his MCU projects? To understand that, we need to understand one word: verisimilitude. Verisimilitude in this context means being honest to the character and its the character's world. The word encapsulates the idea that a movie about a man flying around in tights can be earnest and sincere. Superman the movie was guided by verisimilitude for the world of Superman. And I would argue the most successful Marvel movies echoed that verisimilitude for their characters. Now, to understand why that is such a big deal, we need to understand the place comic books and comic book media were in during the 1970s. In 1954, as a response to Frederick Wortham's book, Seduction of the Innocent, the Comics Code Authority was created. This board regulated what could be shown in a comic book, effectively neutering the creative freedoms enjoyed by the medium at its height in the Golden Age. This led to the creation of stories that focused more on zany adventures or silly humor. Now, if you've seen Superman covers from the Silver Age, you can understand what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen them, go look them up. Superman in the Silver Age was zany and wild and random. But he was also incredibly popular. In fact, this may have been his most popular era. And he spawned multiple spin-off titles with multiple spin-off characters and a zoo's worth of super animals. Eventually, he had Superman, Action Comics, the Supergirl backups in Action Comics, Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, the Superman family, a plethora of comic titles. Then in the 60s, when the kids who grew up reading those zany Superman comics were adults and maybe had kids of their own, the Batman TV series and movie debuted, embodying the campiness of the Silver Age and distributing it on a wider scale. The Batman TV series became such a phenomenon that it cemented the idea that comics characters were childish and silly. Meanwhile, during that era, the Marvel method was doing its best to provide a counter-argument. But in spite of their best efforts of Kirby, Ditko, and Lee, the Batman phenomenon was too culturally resonant. And by the time we get to the late 70s, comics had turned to the more serious stories of the Bronze Age. But the impact of Batman 1966 still loomed large. Even though comics had shifted as a medium to appeal to adults and kids, no studio had successfully transitioned that shift on screen. The popular comic show of the time was Wonder Woman. While it was popular, it did not reach the cultural heights of Batman. Nor did it sway studios about the potential of comic book heroes. It was within this context that the Salkinds approached Richard Donner with the option to direct Superman the movie. Now, let's not kid ourselves. Superman had already been successfully adapted in about any way you could. A radio show, a newspaper strip, a TV show, the Fleischer cartoons, serial movies, and a film titled Superman and the Mole Men. Since basically the beginning, Superman had successfully leapt from the pages of the comic books into anything that he wanted, anything you could think of. But aside from newspaper strips, by the mid-1970s, it had been over 20 years since he had appeared in any of those other mediums. Over 20 years of just newspaper strips and comic books. And geez, I thought we were hard up as Superman fans in the 2010s. And Batman's show had significantly altered the superhero landscape. It caused many to doubt how effective a comic book hero could be on the big screen. With these thoughts potentially in mind, Donner read the original script from the Salkinds. The Salkinds had commissioned one and requested that the movie embrace the campiness of Batman 66. But Donner's first act as director was perhaps his greatest. He took the script and ripped it up. He then reached out out to his friend Tom Mankiewicz. Sorry, Tom. That is Tom Mankiewicz, Mankiewicz. I want you to be able to look him up. He deserves so much credit for the success of Superman the movie. Tom has conversations with Dick about writing a new script for Superman. At first, he doesn't want to do it because it's a comic book project. But eventually, Dick convinces him to because he says the vision of the movie is the love story between Lois and Superman Clark. And Dick had the desire to make people believe a man could fly. Dick fought with the Salkinds over so many aspects of the movie. Casting, special effects, scripts, filming locations, so many things. His guiding principle was authenticity and verisimilitude towards the world of Superman. Everything had to look authentic in order for it to feel like a real world and real people. Smallville was filmed in an authentic prairie town in Alberta, Canada. Reeve added 40 pounds of muscle to build out his frame and remove the need for padding. The new script worked to help audiences believe that these were real people and not just a visual spectacle. All of this worked to create a film that exceeded expectations and left an indelible imprint on generations of people. I've seen it many times, but I thought for this, I want to rewatch it. So I rewatched it with my kids, actually. And I'll admit they got bored at some points, and sometimes they came in and out. But after rewatching the movie, I had to ask myself, overall, does the concept of verisimilitude for the hero hold up? This was a tough question because I didn't grow up reading Superman comics in the 70s and 60s. And his world at that time is so different than what he is experiencing today in the comics. But the movie maintains a focus on the core characteristics that I identify with Superman. And that resonates in the movie, and I can see it through most of his publishing existence. Superman, at his core in the movie, is a good person who is just trying to help people in the best way he can. Also at the core is Superman's love for his family and Lois Lane, as well as Lois Lane's love for him. So, I don't want to spend too much time on a synopsis of the movie. If you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor and watch it. But I'd imagine if you're a fan of SupermanHomepage.com, you've already seen it, you've already loved it. So let's just dive into the basic structure. So, we start with the main character's pre-hero backstory. In this case, we look at the world of Krypton and its explosion and his growth on the farm and in high school. We then have the major status change that challenges what he believes about his future. Jonathan Kent dying, and he learns that he's an alien. And after training, he goes out into the world. In this case, his training montage, we don't get to see that. He goes with Jor-El and learns about, I guess, what it takes to be a hero. We don't really get much depth into that. He then reveals himself a hero and works as a hero. And here we get an amazing section of the film where he goes around just helping people after saving Lois from a helicopter. He falls in love with Lois, and we get the introduction of the primary antagonist, Lex Luthor. After that introduction, they have a confrontation where Superman fails, but then he's able to overcome the obstacles and succeed. All of these phases of the structure are steeped in verisimilitude and focus on his core values. We see what makes Superman Superman. And it very clearly follows the hero's journey as outlined by Joseph Campbell, similar to the blockbuster that would come out, or that came out right before, showing Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. Sorry, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I mixed up there. Now, is its influence seen in the MCU movies? I can already tell you that the focus on verisimilitude is pervasive in many of the early MCU movies. I do think that many of the less successful MCU movies moved away from that verisimilitude and began to treat it more as spectacle and as the superhero world as being silly. But the ones that earnestly depicted their world showed great success. And I'm already thinking of Iron Man and the first Captain America and Captain America Winter Soldier and the Spider-Man trilogy. They had a verisimilitude towards the character. So what are the legacies of Superman in the modern MCU? I've broken down what I feel they are. First off is that verisimilitude. Does the film show the world of their characters in an honest and earnest way? Verisimilitude to Superman can be seen throughout the movie. His costume is earnestly worn. It's ripped straight out of the comic book without any attempt to modernize. Some characters make comments about it, but the key is that Superman never does. He is earnestly wearing it. Also, his name, there's no cheeky comment about where the name came from and no attempt to over-explain it. In addition, the logo, there's no attempt to say that it's means hope or anything. It's just Superman's logo, which I think is an important aspect of the movie. We don't need to over-explain things about them. Some things we can just accept on the fact that he's Superman. Next, the core of the character. Does the film accurately portray the core of the character? Next, substance over spectacle. Superhero movies are all about big action set pieces, and that's okay. But there needs to be substance to the story that is enhanced by the action, not a spectacle that uses action as the driver of the film. And last, structure of the origin. How closely does the MCU film follow the basic origin structure of this film? This will obviously be skewed by whether a movie is a sequel, a team-up, or an origin. But I believe that even in sequels and team-up movies, that basic structure of the Superman movie will be seen. Now, I'm so excited. I had such a blast watching this movie. I hope you take time out to go watch it yourselves. And I'm excited to dive in and see how Superman created the MCU. Thanks so much for listening. I'll catch you next time. Have a great day in the Clubhouse. Bye.